Hello and welcome to this beginner's guide to Zapier MCP. My name is Bill Tucker, and I'll be taking you through the basics of MCP, what that actually means, how Zapier fits into the picture, some basic configuration, and some very cool connections you can make using Zapier MCP with your AI client of choice. But before we get started, let's first talk very quickly on what we'll be learning in this session. This course is going to guide you step by step on the basics of Zapier MCP, how to create basic workflows, and provide some ideas on how you can scale to fit. The first thing we'll be talking about is the what and why of Zapier MCP. After that, we'll talk about the connections and tools that are available within Zapier and MCP. We'll talk about creating some basic workflows to transmit data from one source to another. Data reliability, a huge issue when it comes to working with AI tools. How do we make sure our data is reliable? We will touch on that later on in the video. And then finally, some ideas on how to scale MCP to really become a usable member of your team as opposed to a standard AI client. One thing we will not be discussing though is coding. MCP is a framework and as such does require a good amount of coding know-how to really scale upwards. This session will not be discussing Python or Docker or any of the tools that you could use to code MCP. We're going to focus on how Zapier fits within the framework and some of the easy to use, no coding required tools Zapier offers within the MCP framework. So we won't be giving any coding advice or teaching you how to use Python. We're simply going to be focusing on Zapier's role within MCP within a particular AI client. Before we get to all of that, though, you may be asking yourself, what is MCP? What is this framework that we're going to be discussing today? And on a very broad spectrum, MCP stands for Model Context Protocol, and it solves a very interesting problem that we've had with AI since the very beginning. See, AI is a great researcher, but a terrible doer. AI is great for looking up things online, providing advice for where to go on vacation, providing itineraries. It's good at providing information in an easy to read, easy to understand way. But the problem is that it always lacks context. It's always just going to take in an input from you, compare it to its library, compare it to the training data that it's been set up with, and then provide an answer. But that answer never has context. It never understands the why or the process behind what you're asking. It's just going to provide answers based on data provided. MCP turns AI into a doer by providing that context. It connects to tools. It will see what it looks like in the Zapier framework in a little bit, utilizes resources from different places, and still relying on prompts to generate the data we're looking for. A great way of thinking about MCP is thinking about web pages. If you look in the upper left-hand corner of every website, you'll see HTTP://. HTTP is a protocol that facilitates communication between websites and users. You can access HTTP sites through any browser, Chrome, Safari, Terminal on your computer, but it's all using the same standard to create those connections. So MCP is very similar in that way, where it's a set of standards, a framework that many different systems and many different AIs use to facilitate communication between sources. So you're not just relying on the training data of the AI, you're incorporating other pieces of information, such as your Google Sheets or your Slack messaging system or your calendar, your CRM. You're incorporating actual real world data or context that's going to allow the system to make decisions and actually do some work as opposed to just providing information. So that's what MCP does. It provides that framework for AI to move from a personable search engine to a vital member of your team that can actually perform tasks and do work. So here's a quick look at the MCP framework. First, you have a host. That could be ChatGPT, Claude, a homegrown AI tool. That's your host. That is the engine on which the prompts are going to be processed. You then have an MCP client that handles the communications and the authentication between the host and your sources. And then you have your MCP servers, and the MCP servers connect to either local data sources, as you can see in MCP Server A, or connect to remote data sources via APIs by MCP Server B. Now, if that sounds like a lot of acronyms and a lot of directions, don't worry about it. This is more informational because every MCP compliant host and server follows this framework. So whether you're working with ChatGPT or Claude, or whether you're working with Zapier or a different MCP server, or making your own via coding, this is the basic framework for that model. So how does Zapier fit within MCP? See, most MCP implementations require coding, development work, lots of hands-on manipulation and maintenance to make things work. The good news is that Zapier already has integrations with thousands of different apps. So utilizing those existing connections, Zapier MCP turns app actions into tools that MCP can use to actually do work. Instead of building these connections from scratch, Zapier already has the integrations in place. It's just providing it in this MCP framework that AI can use to actually do work and make decisions. And as you can see here using our framework diagram, we still have an MCP host, which is either ChatGPT, Claude, or an AI tool. But for the communications, we have the Zapier integration and tools that are already baked into Zaps, into tables, into the entire Zapier ecosystem. And you could still have an MCP server A that goes to a local data source, but what we're going to be discussing is how we can use the Zapier server and those existing connections to connect to remote data sources and utilize remote data sources to either make decisions or do work. Now, you may be thinking to yourself, what's the difference between agents and MCP in the Zapier ecosystem? Up until now, we've been talking a lot about how to create Zaps, how to integrate them into tables and forms, and those automations are fantastic, but they're very different than the power and flexibility available with MCP. Zapier agents, the pro of them, they're easy to use and there's no coding necessary. All of the data is drag and drop, and it's very easy to create those Zaps with absolutely no coding knowledge whatsoever. The con of those is that there is some limited flexibility and some scalability issues. The larger you scale, the less flexible Zaps can be. Even though they are incredibly powerful, you do run into some scalability issues. The best use case for them are lightweight automations in low to mid-size implementations. Again, that's not limiting the power of Zaps because they are incredibly powerful, but the scalability becomes an issue when you're dealing with large amounts of data in a large integration. We also have AI powered by MCP. Now, MCP is extremely powerful when you're pairing with AI. The pro of that, of course, is that developers have full control over the data flow and allows for some really creative custom solutions. It's extremely powerful because MCP on its own requires a developer to know programming languages and to know API calls and to create very specific custom solutions for complex problems. But the con of that is it requires that coding knowledge. So there's a very large barrier of entry to using MCP. You need to have those developers on hand who know how to utilize not only the AI platforms that you've incorporated into your business, but MCP as a framework. The best use of AI powered by MCP are teams that need specialized AI capabilities and have the developers on hand who can use it to its fullest extent. Zapier MCP, in my opinion, is the Goldilocks perfect porridge. It's kind of the perfect blend between a Zapier agent and an AI powered by MCP. The pro of Zapier MCP is that it allows one click, and I use that in quotes because there are multiple, but simple click MCP implementations with existing app tool integrations. And if you want to continue and move on with more advanced coding, that can be manually done if your scope increases. So it kind of provides this lovely little middle ground that allows you to really explore what MCP can do and provide that scalability. The con is it does require a Zapier account and it costs 2 tasks per call on your Zapier account. Zapier MCP is available on the free platform, but it's very limited in the amount of calls it can do. If you want to scale, you will have to pay for the upgraded plans within Zapier. So the best use for it are teams that want to start with MCP quickly with the opportunity to scale in the future. So now that we've discussed exactly what MCP is and how Zapier fits in, let's log into MCP on Zapier and take a look at the system. Now, to set up our first Zapier MCP connection, we need to go to a brand new website in order to do that. We're going to go here to our address bar and do mcp.zapier.com. And that's going to take us to the Zapier front end. Now, right now we have no MCP servers. We're going to change that momentarily. I'm going to click on New MCP Server, and this is where I'm going to set up the server side of MCP. Now, for this situation, again, you can use ChatGPT, Cursor. Most AI clients have built-in connections with Zapier. We're going to be using Claude for our purposes. So I'm going to click on Claude. Just like that, it's going to create the Claude client. And now I need to add some tools. So the tools are basically the toolkit that the AI can use to generate results. So I'm going to click on Add Tool. And let's say for this situation, all I want to do is copy the most recent record in my Zapier table to an external Google Sheet that I created earlier. So the first thing I'll do is create Zapier tables. I'm going to give it all the tools it needs. So I want to be able to find a table, get the summary value. And again, for here, the AI in question will only have access to the tools you give it. So think about it as if you're filling the AI's toolbox with exactly the hammer, nails, screws, and drills that you wanted to use. You don't want to give it access to your entire garage because you're not quite sure what it's going to do with that. So I'm just going to give it the ability to create records, delete records. Let's do update some records and then connect. Really simple, basic, and I can always go back here if I feel like I need to and add more tools to the toolbox. Once again, I'm going to add a tool. I'm going to say Google Sheets. I want it to find a worksheet. I also want to get the row by ID. I want to get spreadsheet by ID. And now I also want to create a spreadsheet row. And I'll also give the ability to create multiple spreadsheet rows if it needs to. From there, that looks good enough. I'm going to click Connect. And just like that, I've now added tools to my MCP toolbox that my AI can now start working with. Now, the next step in the configure is to connect it. I need to connect my MCP server to my MCP host, which in this case is going to be Claude. So I'm going to click on Connect. Here, it gives me specific instructions for Claude. Every AI host is going to be a little bit different. I'm going to copy the URL here. And now I'm going to go down here to my Claude and now connect up with that URL. So this URL that I have in the Zapier MCP is what Claude or my AI client is going to use to connect. It's going to use that connection. So for Claude, I'm going to expose the left-hand side. I'm going to here to my settings, down to connectors. And here I'm just going to add Zapier as a connector. So I'm going to browse my connectors, search for Zapier here. There it is. Hit the plus to connect. And now it's going to ask me to paste the server URL here. Right click, paste, and continue. Now this URL is specific to you. I'm going to click continue. It's going to ask for access to the Zapier account. I'm going to say allow. And within a few seconds, I should have access. My browser is going to ask me to open up Claude. Just so you know, for Claude, it does require the desktop app to work with this. Other AI agents do not. And just like that, I have now connected it up. And you can see here, it says I've connected to Zapier, and now I can start having it do some work. The nice thing about connecting it with Zapier is that you don't have to worry about authentication. Authentication is already taken care of in Zapier. So you don't have to worry about keys. You don't have to worry about secrets. You don't have to worry about passwords, managing them. Everything is handled within Zapier natively. So if it's connected in Zapier, it's now connected to your MCP AI client. All right, so let's go ahead and see if we can get it to do a simple workflow. Now let's try a very basic function within Claude utilizing our newly created Zapier MCP connection. So the task I want to do is, I always say please. I'm always polite to my AI clients. I try to be at least. Please add the last row in my Zapier table called request tracker to my Google sheet called Tucker Tech Customer Tracker. This is really basic. I'm not giving it anything else other than that, so I'm just going to hit the plus button or the arrow key to request it. Whenever your AI client asks for permission, always allow. There are options here to allow once or always allow, but for our purposes, we're always going to allow this connection. Zapier is going to find the table. It's also going to find the records. And let's see if it can identify what that last row is. My goal is for this to do this without me having to go into the table itself to find it. Okay, it looks like it's still trying to find the table and the record. So it looks like it has the table ID, so now it's going to retrieve some records. So very interesting. It tried to find the last row by something that was created today. And it didn't find anything. So it's looking for a date filter to get all the records. Interesting. Interesting part about this, it says the find records tool requires a specific lookup value. So it's asking for a value from the last row. So I believe we have record ID. Let me go into my tracker to see. Request ID. So let's go ahead. So we want to copy request ID 14. So I'm going to say use, or it should be request ID 14. Let's see if it can go off of that. It looks like it's called the Zapier Tables Find Records tool. Perfect. Found the record based off of that information. It's interesting that it was going to try to find the one that was created today, which would be a better use case anyway. I haven't added to this table in a couple of days, so that's not the worst logic for Claude to be using. It's calling the Google Sheets create spreadsheet row function. All right, it looks like it's found the request ID, which is Javier Bardem, successfully added as row 12 in the Tucker Tech Customer Tracker Google Sheet. Gives me a little summary of everything that was added. And if we drumroll please over to the Tucker Tech sheet, boom, there it is. Perfect. So as you can see, we are utilizing our Zapier information to connect different sheets with each other and different platforms with each other within the MCP-enabled AI platform. Now let's take a look at a more challenging example for the AI. Now that we've put together a basic instruction and confirmed the connection works, let's do something a little more advanced. Let's say I want to provide Claude with a brand new lead that I want added to my Tucker Tech customer tracker, and I want a message to be sent to my Slack channel alerting my sales team that this new customer is here. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to put in a pretty detailed prompt, but before I do that, I need to do two things. I need to connect Slack to Claude and connect it up to Zapier. So let's go to my Zapier MCP, going to add a tool, go to Slack. Here, I'm going to give it a bunch of different tools. I want to get message, get some reactions. I want to be able to find a message or find a user. I want to add reactions if it needs to. I definitely want to send a channel message. That's the goal of what I'm trying to do here. I don't want to do send direct message just yet. That may be down the line. Private channel for sure. That might be good. That should be everything. And maybe even edit a message just in case something goes awry. So I'm going to connect it up here. And there's going to add the tools. And just like that, Slack has been added. Just be aware when you do this for the very first time, it may ask you for Slack to authorize. Just say yes to authorize to all the permissions. I had already done this before, and you can see now I have all of these different actions or tools available for my MCP. But now I need to go to Claude and do the same thing there. So I'm going to go to Claude. This will be different depending on which system you're using. Settings, connectors. And I'm going to go ahead and add connectors. There's the Slack connector. This is just going to ask me basic authentication. I'm going to allow this for my Tucker Tech Compy Repair workspace. Hit allow. Open Claude back up. And away we go. So we should be now connected here. So let's go ahead and put together a pretty detailed prompt advising Claude on what I need done. So please, I'll even spell it properly. Please create a new record in my Tucker Tech Customer Tracker Google Sheet with the following information. I know I need a phone number. This is not Jack Black's real phone number. I promise you that. Phone, what else do I need if I go to my tracker? Date received, let's make the date received today. Oops, let's make sure I spell that right as well. Give it a status of new customer. Let's say he's got a PC. And say he's got a desktop. And then finally, we're just going to do an issue from the customer. I'm not sure on the OS, so I'm just going to do issue from customer here. Perfect. And now I'm going to put in the parameters for the Slack channel. I'm also going to advise it on the tone. And these are the things that AI is really pretty good at when it comes to creating messages. All right, let's see how this goes. Going to do both of those things simultaneously. So the first thing it's going to do is create the spreadsheet row. All right, if I look at my sheet, I can see already that it's Jack Black's been added. Great. And all the parameters are there. That's perfect. Just hasn't returned the result yet. So it created the spreadsheet row, and now it's going to look for the channels and send that message to the channel. Claude wants to use the send message. Great, always allow. That's perfect. All right, and the friendly alert has been sent. Let's take a look and see what was sent. And there it is. Got the little celebration emoji. Fantastic. Got the information, email, and a little muscle emoji as well. Not bad. Very nice. Now that we've proved out the connections across multiple apps, let's give it something even more challenging before we move on to making it reliable and guardrails. Now that we've seen what Zapier MCP can do with external sources, let's take a look and see what it can do with internal sources directly from Zapier. So the example I want to do is, and I already saved the prompt, please give me a list of all the customers in the Zapier table called request tracker that have a priority of high and a status of new. I'm going to tack on, please include the phone number so I can reach out to them, and date created. All right, perfect. So I'm going to start that call. Let's watch Claude do its thing. First thing it's going to do is going to try to find the records within the request. And a nice thing too is when you're working within any of these AI tools, if you click on the request itself, you can see the actual code is trying to run. So there you can see the actual code is trying to run as it does it. And if there's any errors, you can see what the errors are themselves. It's going to do another find records request. This one has some results. And it looks like it has a question it's going to ask if it can't do it with the other options. Let's see how it goes. Okay, it looks like one of the results came back with a red, but let's see where it goes from here and see what we can find out. It looks like we're getting a response that it found the 4 customers. And very interesting, it didn't find the phone number. And that's right, because my request tracker doesn't have a phone number. I was looking at the old one. So, very good. I'll take it. Nicely done. Nicely done. So it didn't have a phone number, but it did return me all the information from the request tracker. This information came directly from Zapier tables. That's perfect. So let's see if it'll add the field. I said column, but field is probably the correct way of doing it. Okay, so it doesn't look like that integration is available with Zapier tables. Not a big deal, but it does give me information on how to do that and add that to the table myself. Great. Now that we've seen what an MCP-enabled AI agent can do using Zapier tools, let's talk a bit about how to make these results reliable by writing amazing prompts. So here are some tips on prompt writing to help with that process. The first thing is to be specific. You always want to make sure you're giving as much information to the AI chatbot as humanly possible. The more information you give, the better the results are going to be. If you can see from our good prompt, I have structured instructions. I'm asking it to create a Gantt chart KPI report in a PDF format with some parameters. In the not so good prompt, I'm leaving it very generic. I'm just asking, hey, create me a KPI report for my upcoming projects. You'll get results, but the results will take a lot longer to generate, and they likely won't be what you're looking for. So whenever you're creating these different prompts, always try to be as specific as humanly possible with those prompts. Next, provide a role for your AI to play. This is very important if you're doing any sort of writing or blog post creation, email creation, especially if they're going out to customers. You want to give the AI a role to play to tailor messaging closer to what you're trying to achieve for your customers, your team, etc. Notice in the good prompt, I'm telling it to write a 400-word blog entry about our upcoming project deadlines in the voice of the CEO. I'm also advising it to keep the tone professional and positive, and to make sure I focus on an upcoming project as the highlight of the piece. You're going to get a much better result with that prompt than you would by just saying, write a blog entry about our upcoming project deadlines. You'll get something, but you'll likely not get a usable result unless you tell it the tone of voice in which to create things in. Next, define your format. AI is very good at providing data in defined formats, but we need to let the AI know exactly what that format is. Notice in the good prompt, I created our monthly sales report as a PDF and include a pie chart and a bar graph to show the different regions. In the not so good prompt, I'm just telling it to create the sales report comparing the different regions. The difference here, of course, is how I want these results to be displayed. I want it as a PDF with a pie chart and a bar graph. If I don't include that information in my prompt, I'm very likely going to get a result that doesn't quite capture what I'm trying to do with this result. Next, let's talk about providing context for our AI prompts. And this is exactly what Zapier is incredible at. Zapier provides all of the company information that your organization uses on a day-to-day basis. It gives it your sales numbers, your ticket counts, your information. It allows the AI to tailor results to your specific organization, which it can simply not do if it's just using its own libraries and its own training data. So providing context in your prompts is equally important. Notice in the good prompt that I'm asking it to create a weekly call volume report for our director of support that displays total cases created, total cases closed, time to close, etc. And I'm also stating the goal of this, and the goal is to make sure that we're at least keeping pace with last week's metrics and to encourage the team of our overall progress. I'm including that context because it's really important for AI to know why we're doing these things, not just what we're doing. And while it seems like it is extra information, this context does help produce better results. Studies have shown that. So definitely make sure that you're producing the whys in your AI prompts. Just as important as giving it lots of information, we also need to hold it back a little bit. Give the AI constraints. So notice here in the good prompt, I'm telling it to create a yearly recap email of our most profitable projects, but I want to limit the results to 5, only include sales rep, profit margin, and total revenue. I don't want everything. Giving AI constraints is just as important as giving it lots of information, because AI will give you everything you ask for, but it may be too much. It may be an overwhelming amount. So putting some constraints on your prompts will allow AI to generate better results for your organization. And finally, think step by step. We have in our good prompt, notice how I'm putting all of these different things into steps. I want to pull all cases from Jira that are opened. I want to include this information. And in step 3, present the data as a bulleted list. All of that information in the good prompt is in the not so good prompt. It's all there. And while this is readable for a human, for an AI bot, this may be a little more challenging. And honestly, for a human, this would be pretty challenging as well. I would probably have to go through this and parse it out as a person if I was handed this task by a manager. For the good prompt, the step-by-step makes things a lot easier. So definitely think step-by-step as you're working through your AI prompts and working with your AI chatbot. Now let's talk a bit about safety and reliability. Obviously, when you're working with large language models and working with AI, safety and reliability is paramount. AI makes mistakes. That is just the nature of it. We still have to check its data. So one of the big tips I always say is do dry runs whenever possible. Dry runs allow you to see the results before it hits any databases or hits any email boxes or Slack messages. Do dry runs whenever possible. Part of that is creating test environments for data manipulation. Most systems allow you to create test environments. I always recommend doing so and allowing your AI to influence that data before putting it out in the wild. The last thing you want to do is introduce an AI component to an existing process on live data, and all of a sudden you have a big mess on your hands that's challenging to clean up. So always make sure you're using test environments for your data manipulation. Thirdly, edge cases. This is always challenging because you don't know what you know until you don't know it. But always think about the edge cases, the weird scenarios. What happens if a user inputs a decimal when I'm only expecting an integer? Or what happens if the spelling is wrong on something? What happens if I have a result that is 150% profit, which we know is not possible? Test those edge cases when you're testing it out against your test data in those test environments. Try things out, see if you can break the AI and break your prompts when you're building these things out, because edge cases are going to happen and it's really challenging to pinpoint in the moment when you're having those situations. So always test edge cases before publishing live to your production environments. Fourth, Avoid sensitive data. This is an AI thing. And if you listen to any AI podcasts or read any AI articles, sensitive data is often one of the top topics. The reason is that AI as a framework and a structure has very little security built in. Now, using Zapier MCP, Zapier has enterprise level security, so the data traveling within Zapier is always going to be protected to the highest extent. But MCP as a framework doesn't offer that. So just keep in mind the type of data you're sending to your AI chatbot. So avoid sensitive data, avoid PII, avoid any banking information, avoid anything that could be seen as sensitive and corruptible and used by a competitor or a bad agent to harm your business or harm your organization. This is a topic that is high on the list of everybody who deals with AI. So I wanted to make sure that it's clear here. If you're working with MCP and you're working with some of these chatbots, try to avoid sensitive data whenever possible, even though Zapier does provide that best-in-class enterprise-level security for its data. And finally, utilize Zapier logging data for error handling, process scheduling, etc. MCP in Zapier has a number of tools, which I'm going to show you in a moment, that allows you to log data for that error handling and different types of research purposes. Always use the tools available to you when you're building out your AI chatbots and building out your prompts for MCP. So let's take a look at the site itself and some of the logging information that exists already within Zapier MCP. Now, the best place to go within Zapier MCP is the History tab. So if I go here to the top and go to History, I'm going to get a detailed list of every action that's been performed against my Zapier MCP instance. So you'll see here at the very top, I have a Find Records. If I click on the arrow to expose this, you'll see the execution ID, which is very helpful if you're reaching out to Zapier support for any help with troubleshooting issues. In some instructions, it gives me the instructions that it tried to send. It gives you the resolved fields that were generated. It even gives you a final output in a very detailed code base format. Really useful information. This is especially good if you're trying to research errors. So for example, in this result, this Get Many Spreadsheets row advanced, I have my instructions. I just told it to get all the rows from the Tucker Tech customer tracker spreadsheet. As you can probably tell, that was not the best prompt, as we discussed earlier in the video. So I probably could have made a better prompt to be more detailed and more focused in what exactly I wanted. It had the input parameters as null, and the final output was I was missing something. I was missing a required field as to what worksheet was missing. So again, if I'm troubleshooting, I can see exactly what the error output is outside of Claude or outside the chatbot and see what Zapier is returning. This is also really important if you're starting to code on your own. You're going to have a lot of different sources feeding into your MCP framework, and Zapier might be just one of the many tools that you're using. So knowing where to go for error handling will allow you to drill down to where the problem is and resolve it within that tool. Here at the top, you can see I can also filter. I have it set to all actions right now, but if I know the exact call I'm looking to work with, if I click on the dropdown, it gives me a list of all of the tools available to MCP right now. So if I do Google Sheets, look up Spreadsheet Rows Advanced, you can see I can see that exact call from the 25th of February, where I got this error, no object generated, could not parse the response. And essentially telling me, yep, my prompt was not detailed enough for this action. Also keep in mind, as you're working with MCP, you are limited to the amount of tasks you can run per month. This is based off of your plan that you are signed up with Zapier. That information is located here in the lower left-hand part of your screen. Very convenient, so you can keep track of exactly how many tasks you have available and scale appropriately if needed. And one final thing I'd like to share with you on the support side of things is the support button here for Zapier support. There are 3 methods. There is an AI chatbot that you can talk to about Zapier MCP. You can actually chat with the developers directly in Slack, which is a beautiful feature especially if you're using this to build out your own MCP. And of course, a knowledge base that has everything you'll need to know about the MCP itself. Now that we have some best practices in place and some good ideas on how we can utilize Zapier MCP with an AI client, let's put it all together in a sort of final exam for Claude that's going to pull together everything we've learned so far in this video. So what I'm going to do here in Claude is put together a multi-step prompt that's going to do 4 things. I want to pull all records from the request tracker Zapier table that have a priority of high and a status of either in progress or new. Secondly, from the data, create a simple report showing the number of records per owner. Third, send the report to the new customer alerts channel in Slack. And then finally, send a private message in Slack to my username with all the records pulled in step 1. Only include the name, owner, and date received in the message. This is a lot of stuff put into at once, but notice we're using some of our best practices. We're stepping through the instructions, we're being as detailed as possible, and we're giving Claude every opportunity to use the Zapier MCP connections to its fullest extent. Let's go ahead and click on the orange arrow and watch this begin to cook. So first thing it's going to do is pull those high priority records with the status of in progress or new. This is great because it's doing that first step first, which again is the biggest benefit of stepping through your prompts with an AI client. Also keep in mind the time it takes for these functions to perform can vary wildly from client to client and from time to time. Some days it may take a few minutes, some days it may take longer, but just keep in mind that it is doing a lot of work in the background. So be sure to keep that in mind when gauging time and gauging how many resources you need to apply to your AI platform. Looks like we're returning some results. It's saying that all 7 records have a status of new or in progress. Building out that report now. It's perfect. It says the report was sent, and we'll check that in a moment. And just like that, this completed. Perfect. Perfect. Let me go into my Slack channel to see if that actually did what it said it did. See what it looks like. Here's my DMs. And yep, there's the DM that came in. Name, owner, date received. There are all the customers with the date it received. Perfect. This allows me as a manager to go in and actually keep track of some of these customers. For example, this February 22nd, I probably don't need to follow up with the owner, but I may need to follow up with Jamie on Jennifer Aniston here. It's been since February 13th and this case is still open. May want to follow up with Jamie to see what's going on and see if there's a way I can help move the process along. Let's go ahead and check our new customer alerts channel. And there it is, simple report. Bill has 4 records, Jamie has 3. Total high priority open records, 7. Really nice. The only thing I didn't do in my prompt, which I may want to do next time, is to tell the system the tone that I want these messages to be in. But as a simple message, I think this worked great. Now, when I did this in my practice, I want to show you one thing that came out that didn't come out here that I think is really useful. So let's take a look at it. I'm going to expand this a little bit so we can see it. When I click, I got a request tracker window, and this was really useful in putting together these request trackers. And the nice thing about doing this kind of work in AI is that it saves all of your conversations. And now I could just run this every week if I wanted to do a weekly report or a monthly report. This is now all saved. I know the prompt worked well, and I can then fine tune it or just continue to reuse it every single week. What Claude did was create this request tracker workflow, which really allowed me to visualize it in real time, what it was doing every single time. And it gave me the option to run this workflow. Now, again, this may just be a Claude specific feature, but I just wanted to showcase this as well because It really allowed me to see the value of including those steps in a step-by-step manner. Now that we've seen what MCP can do in an AI environment, let's talk a bit about scaling patterns, how ideas for moving forward in your automations and growing your capabilities within your AI client thanks to Zapier MCP. The first one is using your assistant as an operator, allowing the AI the freedom to call tools as needed based off of certain inputs, context, and criteria. With your MCP connection, you've now given your AI client the ability to see your world, to see your data, and to make some decisions based off of that data. So why not try allowing your AI the freedom to make those decisions on its own as opposed to structured inputs? Obviously, this takes a lot of time and practice, but this may be something you want to look into as you move forward in your MCP journey. Secondly, using forms to call a tool. We've already seen how powerful forms are and how important data integrity is to any database operation. So why not try allowing your AI to utilize forms for consistent data input? We've seen Zapier Forms and the power that it uses. See if your AI can utilize those forms to recognize when data comes in and apply that data to your tables or wherever you post your CRM customer data in the system itself. Using forms to call tools can be extremely powerful and help keep that data integrity intact. Because if you're like me and have spent years working with data, trying to make sure it's clean and tidy, you know the pain and drudgery of doing data cleanup. The better data you get in, the better results you get out. So using forms can be a huge way of maintaining that progress. And thirdly, approval steps. Sometimes things just need a human touch. You need a person to review something before AI goes into effect, before the automation goes into effect, especially if it's a high risk, high touch change. You may want a person. Explore how to use MCP in conjunction with a human being reviewing data before it hits live production. This could be something as simple as making sure certain inputs are accurate, making sure that the data is correct before going in, or it could be something large, like ensuring that the tools provided are the tools the AI needs. Regardless, you'll always need a human touch when doing any sort of AI, especially if you're going to be automating data entry and adding things to tables, databases, etc. Before we complete the video, I wanted to bring up our MCP security checklist one more time because it does bear repeating. Remember, the less privileges, the better. MCP doesn't need the entire garage, it just needs a few hammers, nails, and saws. So control what MCP can do and make sure you're auditing on a regular basis to make sure that MCP and your AI client doesn't have too much stuff. Again, AI can be very powerful, but it does make mistakes, and the last thing you want is for it to make a critical mistake on production environment stuff. So always go through your tool lists to make sure that you have the right tools for the jobs you need. Secondly, avoid sensitive data. This is something that I've dealt with in the education software world for years and years. We had a policy at our company where we were not allowed to put student data into AI clients at all because of the dozens and dozens of laws and regulations surrounding student data. So avoiding sensitive data is extremely important when you're dealing with AI clients. Make sure you're giving your AI clients access to only data that can't be used against you or your company, and that's not considered sensitive. Thirdly, test, and retest. Testing is an ongoing iterative process that's vital to continue doing even as your MCP integrations evolve and get more mature. Be sure to test, and retest, and make sure you have those demo environments at hand. They can definitely be your friend, especially when you're introducing new features to your MCP and new tools. Demo environments can be the net for your trapeze artists as you're continuing to hone your MCP workflows and work with your AI clients. So now that we've gone through MCP and everything that it can do, let's try it for yourself. Try configuring your MCP-enabled AI host to do one of the following. Maybe you can have it auto-generate weekly KPI reports to a Slack channel, utilizing tables and utilizing some of the design aspects of AI clients. Ticket triage is a huge deal. See if you can get your MCP-enabled AI host to classify, route, and tag support work so that when support tickets come into your organization, they get routed to the right people, reducing time it takes in the queue and reducing time for customers to get their issues resolved. And finally, automate meeting follow-ups. My company was big on doing this, and it was extremely powerful to have a meeting conclude and then 3 minutes later have an AI-generated meeting wrap-up generated. It was a huge time savings, and it always was helpful having everything in one place. So see if you can get your MCP-enabled AI host to automate meeting follow-ups. Thank you so much for checking out this video on Zapier MCP and how it can work within your selected AI host. If you enjoyed this video, be sure to check out our other training courses on all things Zapier. And until next time, continue learning, continue growing, and I'll see you in the next one.